Get started here. Thank you guys for being here on time. Just for that, I'm actually going to drop the casebook right now. So if you guys are wondering where I got the case today, it's going to be from the Warden casebook from 2017. So if you guys scroll down right through the casebook, it's literally going to be the first case. But alongside not only this case that we're doing today, there's a bunch of other cases. So I just want to drop this in the chat just to make sure that you guys have this. So there's that. Perfect. Today, we're going to be focusing on profitability. We kind of covered this topic a couple weeks ago. However, we didn't really go fully in depth. We more or less just we analyzed that we wanted to go into the revenues and costs, but we never really gave you any data behind that. So today, what we're going to do is going to give you some data. I'm going to make you guys do some number crunching. From there, I'm going to want to hear your math out loud. That's the whole point of this today, more or less to hear you guys out loud talk and rationale through this case. It's pretty simple, but there's a lot of mathematics, so there's a lot of ways to get confused fast. So it's going to be a good case, but please let me know what you guys think too at the end. Okay, perfect. Let me move on to the next slide here. Perfect. So next week's going to be a little bit different. Next week, we're not going to have a live case. We're actually going to have our first firm come to CDP. If you guys are wondering how this is going to look or how this is going to be set up, it's going to be similar to, it's still going to be on Zoom. You guys are going to come in. Plant Moran's going to be here. They're bringing 3 consultants, specifically from risk, technology, and cybersecurity. You guys are going to have about 10 to 15 minutes in different breakout rooms. So you guys are going to rotate through each breakout room. And you're going to have the opportunity to meet consultants from different practices, ask them what they do day to day, and more or less figure out if this is something that you want to do potentially. The whole point of this, and the whole point of this interaction with Plant Moran is to expose you to the different fields within consulting, and then potentially help you guys figure out if maybe this is something that you would want to do. These are all positions that have UIC alumni behind them, and I think most of these consultants are UIC alumni. So I'm sticking true to my word and trying to bring as many opportunities to you guys as we can. But what I would do on your side is be ready, come early. So I'm not going to send, it's not going to be the same Zoom link that we're doing this week. It's going to be a different one. So be ready to check your email. I don't want you guys to miss out on this opportunity. There's also going to be about 10 to 15 minutes where you guys get a breakout room with the recruiter. So if you guys have any recruiting questions specifically about Plant Moran, please bring them, but also have consulting specific questions. So look into risk consulting, technology, cybersecurity, build some questions, and take advantage of this opportunity. Plant Moran's a great firm. They're in the Chicagoland area, and they're literally Union Station. If you get off of Union Station, they're right there, that building. So take advantage of this, and that's going to start at 5 p.m. sharp next Tuesday. But okay. So sticking along with kind of what we've been focusing on this whole semester is the different cases and the different types of themes. So over the last couple of weeks, we've seen different types of cases. Last week, we worked on market sizing or estimation. So that's number 2. Right now, what we're going to focus on is profitability. So, oh, did you say tomorrow? Sorry. Thank you for telling me you can't see any of my slides. So let me put that back really quick and let me share my screen. Which screen can you guys see right now? Actually, let me stop sharing really quick. Thank you for that. And then I didn't say tomorrow, it's actually next Tuesday. So somebody asked in the chat, it's next Tuesday. It's going to be on our regular CDP meetings, but instead of me coming up here and chatting to you guys about, different types of cases and different methods, it's going to be Plant Moran up here pitching recruiting. Can you guys see my screen now? It should be the consulting cases themes. Perfect. Okay. So let me go back to that just so that you guys are updated. I want you guys to be as updated as possible. So this is the profitability case, and then this is a Plant Moran. If you guys want to take a picture, but we're going to have risk, technology, cybersecurity, 10 to 15 minutes in each breakout room. And you're also going to get another 15 minutes with the recruiter. So bring your questions, be ready, and they might give like another like a 10 to 15 minute informational presentation on Plant Moran. So also be ready on that. Okay, perfect. So sticking alongside with our themes that I've been talking about. So last week we focused on market entry. This week we're going to focus on profitability. So if you see the way that this is ranked, this is more ranked on most common types of cases. So profitability is a really type of common case. And I want you guys to be as prepared as possible for this because this is something that you will most likely experience in either a first round or second round interview. So this is a good way to more or less get prepared for that. The idea of profitability is more or less a business is a business's profits have been declining over the last 5 years, 2 years, 3 years. We want to figure out why and figure out ways to increase either their profitability by increasing the revenues or decreasing their costs. So you'll see that today. And the next few weeks we'll be focusing on acquisition and growth, but that's after plant run. Awesome. So I want to remind you guys what the case format is because today it's going to be really important and we're going to be really sticking to it. From right now or what I've been teaching you guys, it's mostly been the prompt clarifying questions and then applying a framework after that. But today I'm going to actually, you guys have gotten some exhibits, but today is really about the analysis part. So once you get those exhibits, what can you do to actually get creative with ideas and pitch to either the interviewer or the person that you're consulting to um, innovative and innovative solutions so that they could potentially solve their problem. So like for today's case, it's profitability. A lot of people are just like, oh yeah, just decrease costs. Well, what specific costs? And today I'm going to give you a little bit of tricks in terms of um, you guys are going to probably give me a certain type of answer and I'm going to be like, no, we actually can't do that. And it's going to be something creative that you guys have to think outside the box for that I'm specifically looking for. And this is how cases are set up and case interviews are set up. They're looking for sometimes specific answers. Other times they're just looking at the rationale that you're thinking through. So yeah, and at the end, I want to hear a recommendation. And I really want you guys to kind of stick to this format. So at first, you're going to get the prompt, ask some clarifying questions. From there, hop into the framework. And then after that, I'll kind of push you guys towards what we should be doing in the analysis portion. Let me pull up the chat here again, just in case. Let me make this huge. Okay, perfect. Okay, so profitability framework, and this is really what we're going to be focusing on today. However, this is not to say that this is the whole framework that we'll be utilizing today. There might be different buckets and different areas that you might want to look into in terms of seeing if this is a right case. So profitability framework, what I said here and what I mentioned earlier, the idea of profitability is a company's profits have been decreasing over the last 5, 10 years, year over year, and they want to find ways to increase that. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be decreasing. Sometimes they just want to increase their profits. And the way that you would do that is you would break it down into two buckets. So in terms of market sizing last week, what we did is we broke it down into two buckets right off the get-go to figure out a market size. That market size was units sold times price per units. But this week, to do a profitability framework, usually the two things that you want to investigate are the revenue and the cost. The rationale behind this is because the only way that you could get to a profit, the only way you get to profit is revenues minus costs, right? So whether you're looking at an income statement, whether you're looking at gross profit, whether you're looking at net profit or net income, it's usually some type of analysis where you're looking at revenues first, which if you don't know what revenues are, those are just your sales. And then from there, looking at any types of cost. In terms of revenue, it's going to be really similar to last week. So in terms of it being a market sizing, how are we going to figure out how much revenue was actually sold, or how are we going to figure out what the actual sales of the company are? Well, the way to do that is we're going to look at the number of units sold and then the price per unit. The one thing I want to say about a framework is when you're giving this framework, the idea is to lead to questions that you can ask, right? So when you're giving your framework here, I want to look at revenues and I want to look at cost. Within revenue, I want to look at the units sold. The reason I want to look at the units sold is because I want to see how many units we have sold year over year, and I want to understand if that's decreased year over year. If that hasn't decreased over year and we've sold the same amount of units, well, maybe it's a cost problem, right? Right? If nothing has changed in terms of the amount of units sold, then it's either a cost problem or our prices have changed, right? And if you ask that question, that gives you more data into the case. So the idea of this framework is to get to a certain type of question, and that's what I want to push, right? So in terms of price per unit, is there any way that we could actually increase the price per unit? So if we're trying to increase profitability, the idea here is we're trying to either increase our revenue or cut our costs, right? So the only way that we can increase our revenue is by selling more units or increasing the price of our units, right? Is that pretty clear? Okay. On the cost side, so that was the revenue side. On the cost side, there's usually two types of costs that you want to look at. Sometimes it's a little bit different, but it's usually fixed cost and variable cost. If you don't know what fixed costs are usually costs that stay the same year over year. They're not really going to change in terms of, they're not going to change depending on how many units you sell. So if I sell 1,000 units, my rent's not going to change. If I sell 2,000 units, my rent's not going to change, right? Things like marketing is another one. Utilities, our payroll, paying our people that do our payroll. Any research and development, that's really not going to change. If we invest $1 million into research, that's not going to change depending on how many units we sell. That's more or less we're trying to evaluate if an investment's worth it, and we're putting a certain amount aside to even go into this type of research. In terms of variable costs, that's the opposite. So these are things that change with the units being sold. So if you're like a finance major, or if you're taking any type of accounting class, things like your cost of goods sold, right? If you sell 1,000 units, right? Your cost of goods sold is going to be dependent on how many units you actually sell, right? Other things like raw materials, that might be something that's depending on how many units you sold, right? So like if I'm creating a new product and I need to make 1,000 of these units, and right now I'm only making 500, I'm probably going to need more materials to make those units, right? So this is something that changes with how many units we're actually selling. Things like wages, manufacturing overhead is another one. So if there's any increase in those types of costs, now we can analyze those costs and see if there's any way to decrease those, right? So you guys are going to do this a little bit later. Right now, I'll give you a little bit of a hint. It's not going to be cost of goods sold. Actually, I think it might be cost of goods. There might be some cost of goods sold in there, but I would try to analyze and get creative with rent. So that's my little bucket, or my little advice. Okay, so there's also the 3Cs framework, which I taught you guys. What I'm trying to push here is today when we're going to be analyzing the profitability of this company, we're not going to only want to look into the revenues and costs. We want to look at things like the markets overall, right? And we could utilize things like the 3Cs framework. We could also trash the 3Cs framework and just be like, I want to look at the market, right? I want to look at the product itself. And within the market, I want to see if the market has been increasing. Is there something happening between the whole economy where our competitors are seeing a decrease in profitability? If they're not, maybe we know that's something that's in-house, something that's our problem. Because if our competitors are not seeing a decline in profitability, why are we, if we're in the same industry doing the same thing, right? So this is just another framework that you could utilize in terms of adding more buckets to your framework to make it a more comprehensive analysis. However, today this might not be the most direct approach, but you might be utilizing certain questions from this framework to inevitably come up with, a certain type of solution or recommendation. So I just want to put that out there also. Okay, so I'm going to take a sip of water. Today we're going to hop into the case. So I want to get this kind of going because there's a lot of math in here, and I know that you guys are going to F up, which is completely fine, but that's the goal of it, right? So, okay. So this is a level of difficulty from medium. I got this from the Wharton casebook. So if you got here at 602, I dropped that in the case. It's literally the first case within the Wharton casebook. This is a BCG second round case. So if you guys remember from back a couple weeks ago, they're part of the MBB. BCG is one of them. It's the Boston Consulting Group. So they're one of the top tier firms. Today, we're going to be testing, specifically market sizing is not really going to be tested. I took that a little bit out, but a lot of it's going to be more mathematical computation and utilizing that profitability framework, right? So this is our problem. Our client, Unicloth, is an Asian clothing retailer attempting to establish a profitable presence in the United States. However, since they arrived 5 years ago, they have struggled to achieve that goal and have engaged our firm to find out why and to recommend next steps. How can we help? Product launch shouldn't be there. I don't know why product launch is there. Awesome. So as we usually start any type of case, I'm going to randomly call on you guys, but I think the first thing that we have to do is ask any clarifying questions. So here, our client, I'll read it one more time. It's Unicloth or Uniqlo. You could really think about it if you look at these, if you're really thinking about this, it's Uniqlo who they're talking about here. Our client, Unicloth, is an Asian clothing retailer attempting to establish a profitable presence in the United States. However, since they arrived 5 years ago, they have struggled to achieve that goal and have engaged our firm to find out why and to recommend next steps. How can we help? And then we got product launch there. Shouldn't be there. Okay, so what are some clarifying questions that you guys might have here?
So in general, it sounds like they were some kind of clothing retailer that I would assume was successful in their market in Asia.
Yep.
Is that a correct assumption?
That's a good assumption. However, it looks like they've been struggling once they've come here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then kind of go off that, how long have they been in business as a whole, like in Asia and the US markets is total?
You could assume somewhere around 40 to 50 years. They were a major player within the Asian market, and they thought that entering the US market could be something that was a little bit more profitable for them or, a different opportunity. However, they haven't been able to see that over the last few years. So, those that I guess hopefully that gives you a little bit more clarification.
Mhm.
I have a couple clarifying
Yeah,
questions.
let's hear 'em.
So one of the first ones would be, what was their market segment coming into the US? Where are they currently selling?
Yep.
And what have been their actual product sales and their projected product sales for the last 5 years?
Yeah, for sure. And we'll get some data on that a little bit later. I think those are really good questions. But for right now, you asked for the market segments or what they actually sell. So this company actually sells casual clothing. Think anything like jeans, t-shirts, knitwear, dresses, etc. So just in casual clothing, like an American House or a Zara, maybe as a competition. Think Uniqlo. This is Uniqlo. Any other questions? I think there's a couple that we were missing here, and I think that would be really good questions to know before we comment.
Has their business strategy at all changed from moving from the Asian markets to the US markets?
It hasn't changed. They decided to sell the same products. I think that's a really good question, actually. That might come into play later, but as of right now, what we're trying to do is more or less figure out how we should even approach this problem. Elia, you can go ahead.
I have a question. What are their channels of distribution? Is it like just simply a retailer, or are they also utilizing like the internet, to sell their product here in America?
Yeah, so they manufacture mostly in China and Bangladesh. Like I said, they just were an Asian clothing market or a clothing retailer, so they were in Asia previously, distributing through think like malls. They're going to be at malls, online also. Um, yeah, that's mostly the scope of that. Okay, I'm gonna call on somebody random. That was actually a good question too. So let's see. Let me call on Chetna. Not, we'll pass it on to Ethan.
Yo,
Yep.
you still looking for a clarifying question?
Yeah, so anything that you
O-
would like to know more about the case that might help you in terms of developing some type of framework to approaching this.
Okay, what have the sales looked like since they've entered the American market? Like you said, they were booming before. how much has that dropped off? Do
Yeah.
they have any presence really? Like how much are they competing with?
That's a good question. So overall, the market has been stable recently. So this might be just a firm specific problem. Because the market overall and their competitors are pretty stable. There has been no economic downturn. So that's a really good question. It's a really good question. Okay, so I'm gonna take a step back and then just to keep it going. So our client Unicloth is an Asian clothing retailer attempting to establish a profitable presence. So I'm looking at that in the United States, right? Good question. I'm gonna break down the question though and ask the interviewer, is profitability the only thing that they care about here? Right? Are they trying to expand on their market share? Is there also a timeline associated with this project? So are they trying to be profitable in the next 3 years? Are they trying to be profitable in the next year? Do they have a 5-year plan that we're trying to lay out? That's going to change our recommendation. So that's something that you should know. And for this one, you should say somewhere around 5 to 10 years. They just want to see some type of profitability. They would rather have it in the next 5 years, but they know that they're just trying to enter this market right now, and figure out how they could even become more profitable. Another thing that I would want to know is, has there been a decrease in profit from our competitors? Right? So if we're looking, and that was a good question that actually Ethan asked. So has the market been stable recently? We want to know about our competitors because for us, if our competitors have been decreasing too in terms of profitability, it might be an industry-wide issue instead of a firm-specific issue, right? So instead of now us approaching a problem within the firm, now we could be approaching a problem within an industry, right? So now we could look at the industry and see ways that we could, maybe combat the cost that it's actually applying to our firm, right? Within the industry, instead of looking at, cost on our income statement, to see what is even happening within our firm. And then somebody asked what types of clothes do you sell? So that's what I would have asked. But here are some other ones. So product, what types of clothing do they sell? Casual, think jeans, t-shirts. What are the products made? Manufactured in China and Bangladesh. Market's been stable. And then somebody asked for the average price, or somebody asked more or less on data about the costs and the sales. But right now, what I want you guys to know is the average price per product. So I'd write this down somewhere because, like I said, there's going to be math later on. But this is $40, and this is right in line with mid-tier competitors such as BAP and a bit below European retailer Mara. So think Zara and Gap, right? So yeah, what I want you guys to do now is to take about 2 minutes, build out your framework. And then from there, come back. I'm going to call on you guys. I want you to walk me through your framework. And within each bucket in your framework, come up with 2 to 3 questions that you want to analyze a little bit deeper, right? So if it's even revenues, why do you want to look into the units? Or what can you do with the units to potentially increase our revenue, right? So I just want to hear that out. I'll do it too here, actually. I'll give you guys about 1 more minute here. So build out something. All right. That is right about 2, 3 minutes, I think. As I said, as I always promise, I'll do the case with you. I always apply some type of framework. So I looked into revenues, cost, the market, and the product itself. What I want you guys here specifically, when you guys are presenting your frameworks, is try to do it like you would be in an interview, right? So right now we know our problem is that Uniqlo hasn't been profitable for the last 5 years. They're trying to figure out ways to actually become more profitable, right? So I'm going to restate that to the interviewer just to make sure that we have everything clear before we even go in. And then from there, I'm going to play my framework out, right? So I'm going to restate the prompt just before we go in. And it's not really restating, but today we have Uniqlo coming in. They wanted to see how they could establish more of a profitable presence within the United States, as they're an Asian retailer that just entered the market. So to do this, I think there's 4 things that I want to specifically look into. First, I want to look into the revenue. Within the revenue, I want to look at the units sold, and also the price of the units. The reason I want to look at these 2 things is more or less is I want to see if we could increase the units that are actually being sold. And then is there any way that we could actually increase the price? From there, I want to move into our cost, and I want to look at things like our fixed cost and our variable cost. I think did my mic go out there? No, we're good. Okay, but things like my fixed costs and my variable cost. Within my fixed cost, I want to look at things like our cost of goods sold, to see if there's any way that we could potentially lower that, and to look at our labor, to see if there's any way that we could potentially lower our labor costs associated with creating these products. Not even creating these products, but selling these products. Within variable cost, I want to look at things like our rent, to see if there's any potential ways to maybe minimize our rent or maybe offload it by sharing our rent with some other person. I think that would be a good idea. And then things like our maintenance, right? The other 2 buckets that I want to look at are more broad. So I already looked at the revenues and the costs. Now I want to look into the market. Within the market, I want to understand our competitors, more or less who they are, what they're selling, just to understand more or less like the products. I think that would be a good way to understand our competitors. I want to also understand if there's been any new entrants into the market. So I want to see if there's been any new competitors that have come into the market, that have maybe potentially been taking market share or that have been taking, sales from us. Maybe a potential Asian retailer also came into the United States at the same time, and they've been eating up some sales that we potentially thought we could have had, right? Within the product section, so that was the market bucket. Within the product section, I really want to analyze what do we sell, where is it actually made, to see if there's any cost cutting that we could potentially do there. And I want to see if we actually sell competitive products. So if the products that we're actually putting out to our retailers are actually products that people want and people are using in the American culture. I know that they just came from Asia, so there might be a different type of, dress or apparel that they do out there. So I want to see and analyze our products to see if this is actually a suitable product line or product offering that we're giving our clients. That was my framework. Okay. what I want you guys to do now is to kind of do that, right? So try to lay out your buckets. Try to lay out, so with revenue, I laid out units sold and price, and then I asked 2 questions around units sold and price. Try to do that. And then pick one bucket, ask the questions for that bucket, and then from there, move on to the next bucket. Be structured, be confident, and give it a shot. And I told Nicholas Waiter that I would call on him first yesterday. So Nick, I want to hear you say it, bro, because you said you were gonna fucking eat this profitability case.
I got you, bro.
Yep.
All right. So what we know is that Unicloth is a strong Asian retailer that recently came to the United States to expand its overall sales.
Yep.
But what they're coming to us with the problem is that they're struggling to land any sort of stable profit.
Yep.
So the framework that I came up with was first, I did it kind of in an opposite way where I kind of went to looking at the market first and then the product.
That's awesome.
So first I wanted to like address overall market attractiveness. So evaluating the size and the growth of, what consumer trends are currently and understand like what our competitors are.
Sure.
I also want to know how saturated this product is. So for example, if like our competitor is selling, I don't know, shirts, I want to know if that product with that specific material, that specific design is oversaturated. So maybe that we can get that situated.
Yep.
And whether or not we can maybe offset that piece of clothing for a different piece to kind of get that bottleneck out of the way.
Yep.
And then also like their brand positioning, so understanding where they are in the US market. So you touched on this where there might be a cultural difference
Yep.
between what they're bringing from Asia over here to the United States. So
Yep.
seeing where we can sort of get some sort of customer feedback or brand awareness. And what I would suggest is maybe have some sort of I know like some companies like Shein and things like that, they have influencers where they would promote a certain product to kind of ease cultural integration more smoothly. So there might be to get rid of that barrier. Um, and then what I would also do is let's see. Hold on, I'm just looking at my framework. Understand their pricing strategy as well as what kind of quality clothing do they sell? Do they sell more of a cheaper material that might not cost them a lot, so therefore it's not really selling well because of that issue? Or are we overspending with our vendors and understand what the overall strategy is when it comes to pricing versus what we're selling it for, which was for $40. But if it costs us more to produce that, then obviously we should maybe look at different suppliers or vendors. And then also, let's see. On the performance.
He's typing into ChatGPT right now.
Me?
Nah, I'm just fucking around. That was good, bro. That was really good.
That's kind of where I ended off at. I didn't get to the whole part, but that's I pretty much just got market and product, but I didn't really get to the costs.
That's really good, bro. What I would say is, off the initial get-go, I was gonna leave and make you the host and just leave this meeting and let you run the whole thing, but
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that. No, but that was good. The only thing that I would say is off the get-go, you did really good in terms of analyzing the market and the brand position. However, our problem today is our profitability problem. So you want to actually analyze that and kind of go into that maybe right away, which you did inevitably get to the price and the cost, but it kind of took me a while. And I was like, is he going to mention the price and the cost, right? So if there's a profitability problem, lay it out in the front, right? I want to look into the revenues and costs. I want to see if there's any ways that we could do this. In addition, I want to look at things like our market and our brand positioning. I think the questions that you asked within them were great. I think those were all relevant questions. With the market, you had the size, the growth, and the consumer trends. You also mentioned a really good point with potential saturation. So what if they're selling the same products as, Gap or BAP in this situation, or Zara or Mara in this situation, right? Like, if they can't really differentiate their products, and somebody else is selling it for a lower price, why wouldn't you go to that? Why wouldn't you go to the lower cost item if it's literally the exact same materials, the exact same color, and the exact same style, right? So I thought that was a really good point. With the brand positioning, cultural differences, great point. And then in terms of, you actually even gave some potential things that they could do in terms of small recommendations. So by building that brand awareness, things that they could do is potentially look for content creators, or they could potentially reach out to the market themselves that they're selling to right now to see if the products they are selling are something that they really want, or if they want something, that's different. So I think you had a really good framework there, brother. Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Elijah.
Yeah. Okay. Let me call on Ava. I want to hear what she said.
Yeah.
You're good, take time.
Yeah, okay. So I kind of followed the same framework that you had laid out for us. And I would start off with, on the revenue side, I would segment it by, so segment the revenue by consumer age and gender. I feel like within the clothing and retail industry, that's a good way to kind of see what sort of areas bring in the most revenue and where we can up it and where we need to fix it maybe.
Yep.
And then for each one of those segments, we would see the volume and the price per unit.
Yep.
Because I've noticed that sometimes women's clothing is a little bit more expensive than men's clothing, and that's just an example of something that could be fixed. And then for costs, again, I would look at fixed costs. So like utilities and like especially the marketing that we're maybe doing. And then for variable costs, like what kind of materials are we using, where are we sourcing them from? Because if they're, for example, if their sources are, I feel like if they've just moved in from another continent, if they're
Mm.
sourcing their products from somewhere that's not local, or they still haven't gotten around to finding the best price on sourcing certain raw materials, that could definitely be upping the costs. And then manufacturing, also where they're housed, like where is their warehousing for all these new products that once they've moved,
Yep.
and how big
Warehousing.
is it? And then I would look at both the overall market and then also the company, starting with the market. I would see, I'm guessing like BAP and Mara, they're fast fashion brands. So I
Yeah.
would look at the fast fashion leaders, how much percent market share they have. I feel like it would be kind of a hard market to penetrate in just because it's so much, like the fast fashion market is really big and everyone, it's quite easy to produce mass market clothing.
Yep.
And also for those leaders, maybe study their business model, meaning how are they how are they maybe marketing those those clothes. And then for the company, just for the sake of synthesizing it, I would like to focus on what are our main distribution channels, meaning how are we selling these clothes? Are they found anywhere else? Do we just have our own stores, or is it like, for example, how Target has some brands that they just sell? And yeah, that's where I
Okay.
go to.
No, that's good. And one thing that I would push for as a word of feedback is MISI. And I haven't taught this yet, so that might be on me, but MISI means mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. Basically, the easiest way to explain it is the idea that if you have one bucket, right? So say you're looking at the market, and within the market, you want to look at who your competitors are within the market, right? That's perfectly fine. However, at the same time, don't have a don't have a competitors bucket where you're analyzing and asking more questions about competitors. So when you were looking at your fixed costs, you mentioned things like your distribution channels and looking at those types of costs. However, I felt that the company bucket wasn't even needed. I felt that if you were looking at anything within the company, I would maybe see if I honestly, I think the company bucket wasn't needed, but I think the mentioning of their distribution channels was needed. And you did that, and you did that in the fixed cost portion of it. So when you're thinking of, your framework, think MISI. MISI is mutually exclusive, collectively exhausted. But the idea is that I'm not overlapping two ideas into two different buckets. But other than that, I think you had a really good framework. And I like how you segmented actually the revenue, especially because this is probably more fast fashion. So I think that was really good. You asked for the pricing in terms of what our sales were. And then I'm gonna give you guys some more unit numbers right now. So you guys will actually get to test that. In terms of the fixed cost, I like that you laid out the costs. That was really helpful for me. And it's actually going to be a question that I'm going to ask a little bit later. So I appreciate you even like pretensing us into that. And then looking at the market, I thought that was just completely fair. Looking at the market share of our competitors, looking at the overall leader, and then potentially analyzing that market, or analyzing their business model. I think that's a really good idea. So yeah, I think that was really good. I'll move on from here. So now, Ava, you just asked for more numbers on the revenue, and I'm going to give you it, right? I'm going to give you it, and I want you to give me the calculations. And that's kind of what's going to happen here, right? So we're going to do a profitability analysis on this company. So I've told you that the average price per product is $40, right? And this is, you could assume this is the average sale. So if somebody comes in, they're buying something or two products, three products, it's going to be an average of $40, right? The market sizing, they have two stores. Or they have 4 stores, 3 within a mall, right? And then they have 1 flagship store on Fifth Avenue. And these are going to have different costs associated with them, but right now we are focusing solely on the revenue side of things. At the 3 mall stores, on average, each one of them sells about 1,400 products per day. And there's 3 mall stores there, right? And that's on a per day basis. We're trying to get annual sales. The flagship store sells about 4,500 items per day. And they only have 1 store there. So that's on a per day basis. We're trying to get this annualized, right? And you feel free to round to. Go ahead, Ava.
Do each one of the mall stores sell 1,400 items, or all 3 of them collectively?
That's a great question. That's a great clarifying question. So each one of them sells 1,400. So we have 3 stores or 3 different mall stores. Each one of them sells 1,400 units per day. Awesome. So I'll give you guys some time to calculate. I know this is going to take a little bit of a second. We try to be as quick as possible. But also be okay with rounding. I'm cool with rounding. At least I am. I don't know if your interviewer at BCG might be, but I am.
Mr. Elijah, I have a clarifying question.
To Mr. Aquino at this point, bro. Nah, go ahead.
Are we gonna assume that the retailer is open every single day of the year, or are we gonna include like holidays, weekends?
Whatever makes your math a little bit easier. So if you want to do 350 in terms of days, if you want to do 365 in terms of they're open every day, I would probably assume somewhere around the 300 mark is more appropriate, but I think the calculations that we do here is off 365. So, but that's a fair question. I would let you do 300 if you were interviewing with me.
All right, thank you, Mr. Aquino.
Mm-hmm. All right, so this is a race too. No, I'm just fucking around. Take your time, but whoever comes off or whoever has the calculation, just let me know. I know the guys that are have their camera off right now are just spamming at a calculator. So and I'm also going to ask you to walk me through the math because your interviewer is going to want you to walk you through the math. It's almost an expectation. If you just give them a number, they're going to be like, how the hell did you get that? All right. So start off, do your math, and then talk through your math. And that's what I want to hear from you guys when I call on you. I don't want to hear just a number. I want to hear you guys how you got to that number. All right. I'm gonna call on Riley. Cause it was his birthday yesterday. Gotta make him feel special.
I am not close to being done with the calculations. I can kind of work you through what I was going through, and I think I messed up
Yeah,
some of the numbers, so I kind of had to backtrack.
that's perfect.
So generally speaking, we're gonna want to look at what our, thank you in the chat, appreciate it. So first step is we're gonna try to figure out how much we're selling per year. So we have about 1,400 for the 3 stores, so we're gonna make that about 4,200 through the 3 stores. Then we sell 4,500 at Fifth Avenue, which is just gonna get us close. It's gonna be 4,700, which I rounded to 4,500. And then we're gonna take that, we're gonna multiply it by the product price, which gets us to about 180,000 a day in
Yep.
sales, and then we have 350 days, which gets us to about 50 million in annual sales.
Yeah,
Um,
that's pretty close. We got
from-
about one. We got about 61, but that's pretty close.
okay. Yeah, rounding down twice, so
Yeah, no,
maybe a
you're
little
right.
under.
Yeah, no, you're good. Yeah.
And then after that, we want to look at what our fixed costs and our variable costs are. So fixed costs, we want to look at things like rent, which is kind of where I stopped, but
No, that's fair.
we
So
want to look
right
at
here,
yeah.
you're good. You're kind of taking a step forward. So right now we're doing a revenue analysis. I want to know what the annual sales are for this specific store.
Okay. That's not enough time.
No,
for
you're
like
good.
this.
No, you're good. And I'm gonna give you some more cost data in a second, but right now we're just trying to figure out the annual sales for the 3 stores and then plus the flagship store. So you were
Okay.
pretty close to never first off, so I'm just gonna move on here. Sorry. Um, in terms of price, we had the average price of $40 per unit. We wanted to know the 3 stores and plus the 1 flagship store. So we had to make sure that we were accounting for those 3 mall stores. And that was a great question asked by Ava. Feel free to always ask clarifying questions, especially if they ask you to do some type of analysis or they give you some type of exhibit. So for the 3 mall stores, on average, we sell about 1,400 products per day. That's going to be about $56,000 per store. So 56,000 times the $40 per that price per average sale is about $56,000, or you could say somewhere around $50,000 per day, right? So that means for all 3 stores, we have around $168,000 per day for all the mall stores put together. Now we times that times 160 or 365 to put that on an annualized basis. And then from there, we're at about 61 million. So that is the amount of sales that we had there. It was 61,320,000. You don't have to be perfect, but at least be around the ballpark, right? But that's only for our 3 mall stores. We also have to account for the flagship store on Fifth Avenue. So this one, we're going to be selling about 4,500 items per day. This one's going to be a little bit easier. We just times that by 40. That gets us at 1,800 or $180,000 per day. Times that by that 365 number, and we're at 65 million. So now we have annual sales for our flagship stores and our 3 stores. We could go ahead and move on with $127 million of revenue this year. Does that make sense? It should be pretty easy. We had the price for our average sale, and then they gave us the unit or how many units were actually being sold. From there, we calculated a per day basis, and then we multiplied that by 365 to get it on an annual basis, because the question being asked was an annual basis, and the data that was given to us was on a per day basis. So be aware of that, and that's something that you're gonna have to be aware of in the future. So that's good. Hopefully that was relatively easy, if not completely fine, but something that you should be expecting in any type of case interview. Like I said, this is one of the most common actually given out. Okay, so before I give you the cost, I want to know what are some costs that Unicloth might have. Right now, they're an American or an Asian retailer that just made it to the United States. We know a little bit about their manufacturing. It's in China and Bangladesh. So I just want to know from you guys, like, I want to know personally, what are some costs that you guys think you might have? You said that you want to analyze the costs. I want to know what are some costs that you think Unicloth might have. So I'll start off with Johnny, or yeah, Johnny.
The first one I thought about was obviously shipping costs. Since it isn't manufactured in United States, I was wondering, like how much does it cost like transport like the goods from, I guess, China to the US?
Yep. Okay, no, that's good. And I'm just gonna ask you for a list of them, and then from there, I'm gonna give you guys the actual cost. And then from there, you guys have the revenue right now, which was 127 million. I would write that down. Go ahead, Jade. Any costs that you could take away from this?
So when I worked in property, we normally had like contracts that were like 3 to 5 years. So like these companies typically know like how much the increase is gonna be for rent the next year.
Yeah.
For them to have a store on Fifth Ave is really expensive.
Yep.
So I mean that price could definitely go up. And then the rent in the three malls, I mean, if they have a good flagship store, I'm getting into the analysis, but
Yeah.
also the rent for the presence at three malls definitely affects the fixed cost there.
Okay. Yeah, no, and I appreciate you mentioning that because the rent is something that we're going to be definitely looking at and trying to figure out ways that we can potentially lower that cost. So that's a good one. Elia, go ahead.
I guess in addition to that, we should look at, I guess, maintenance costs of the different locations as well
Yep.
as the wages that are paid to
Yep.
the workers.
That's good. That's perfect. And you'll see in a couple seconds why that's perfect. Any other costs? What's the biggest cost on a balance sheet, especially for or on an income statement, especially for a manufacturer?
Did we mention cost of goods sold?
Yeah, cost of goods sold, which is going to be the biggest variable cost. So that's something that we also want to mention. Because if there's any ways that we could decrease that, that would be huge. So our whole idea here is we're looking at the cost because we want to decrease our cost. Now I'm going to give you some more information on our costs, and I want to see what you guys can take away from this data. Remembering that we just did a revenue analysis and we got to a company's revenue of about 127 million. So just let me know what you think is wrong here. And then from there, we'll go a little bit more into it. All right. Anybody want to raise their hand here? Yeah, go ahead, Ethan.
One question I have is, are they using existing workers from their previous market, or are they hiring new workers to run these the mall stores, the flagship stores?
Yeah, they're going to be new employees that they had to hire. So they came into America, they hired new employees from America. So you could assume that this is the cost associated with all of their labor, in terms of selling, in terms of people at a mall or something like that, like salespeople at a mall.
Same questions before. I assume this is all three stores is 7 million fixed costs.
Correct. Correct. But what's the initial drawback? So you're looking at this is all the cost. We have a profitability problem. Maybe can somebody call out that profitability problem?
I would have said like the unsold, like that's a pretty big number.
That is, yeah, low key, that is a big number. Okay, the biggest drawback that I have here, and the reason that most of you guys are not taking much information out of here. Actually, let me call on somebody else. Liz, what can you take out of this? I don't want to cut it early. If not Liz, I'll go to Ava. What can you take out of this?
I know I'm kind of. I would say the flagship store is really like it's a lot. Like keeping in mind that we could or open 3 more stores in the mall, like in other malls, and I think we need to evaluate how much that flagship store is making as like a revenue compared to what we're paying for it as for rent and for maintenance.
Okay,
But
that's a good. That's a. Go ahead.
yeah, that's all I got. I'm not really sure.
That's a good point. What I would start off to is I have a list of costs. I would add them all up. I would add them all up. So if I'm looking at this 90 million plus 7 million plus 18 million, so the 7 plus 18 is 25. So 115 million. I know our revenue is 127 million. So I'm at already 115. 120 is the next one. 126 is the next cost. And then plus 12 is 138. So now I know what my net income is, or at least my profitability is. It's negative 13 million. That is a huge problem. That is a huge problem, and we need to figure out why. So as I'm looking at this, the data that I could take away is we're an unprofitable company and we're $13 million in the red. And as I'm looking at this, some of the major costs that I could see associated with this are cost of goods sold. So potentially maybe there's ways to lower that. I would also look at things like our flagship store. So that is expensive. So $18 million for the year, divide that by 12, that's about $1.5 million per month for a store. If it's generating enough sales, that might make sense, but we need to analyze that, right? And we kind of already did with our revenue calculation. So maybe we could even reference that later on. But that's what I'm initially taking away from this data. And it's kind of throwing you off just because I threw in variable cost and I didn't really like total anything out. But the idea here is you have a list of costs. First thing should be is add them all up and then look at what the biggest costs are. From there, think about potential ways that you could potentially lower those costs. So that's my next question. What are potential ways that we could decrease our costs? So we're looking at our biggest cost. If we look here, it's somewhere going to be around our cost of goods sold, which is usually something around our manufacturing. It's also shipping is also into our cost of goods sold. So that's something that you guys should also consider. Labor is another big cost. But that's another thing to look at. Our flagship store, maybe potential ways that we could lower that. And then Devassus made a good point with the unsold clothes. I'd probably want to know more information about that, but I don't know if that's really affecting our profitability because they're unsold. And they're marked down, so it's probably stuff that people don't want in general. So maybe more or less get some more information on that. But what do you guys think? What are ways that we could decrease our cost here? Yeah, go ahead, Ethan.
I have a clarifying question before I get into my idea. So for the cost of the rent for the mall stores being 7 million, is that the three of them combined or each?
That's the three of them combined on an annual basis. So if you divide that by three, or go ahead.
If we just go ahead and double the amount of stores, we could have 3 more stores. It would still be less than the amount for the one flagship store. You could have double the amount of stores being 14 million, get rid of the flagship store.
And okay, that's actually a good point. My question would be how would that affect our sales? So if we look at getting rid of those 3 stores and adding 3 more new stores, right? If you look back to the 3 mall stores, the 3 mall stores sell $1,400 per day, and we have 3 of those. So your idea was let's just do another 3, right, and close down the flagship store. However, if you see here, 1,400 times 3 is 4,200. The amount of sales that our flagship store is bringing in is 4,500. Now, you might be right in terms of the cost and it being lowered. However, this is our flagship store. So as of right now, what we could say is no, we need it for marketing. So this is something that's given from the case. So I'm just going to say no, but no, we need it for marketing. And then, yeah, that's what I'm going to say about the flagship store. And if you have something else to say about the closing the mall store, I got a rebuttal for you too. So now I'm going to make you guys think. So what are ways that we could decrease our costs?
This maybe feels obvious, but have we considered moving manufacturing to the US? Would that reduce our costs at all, potentially?
Yeah. So right now we're already producing our closings in the cheapest manner possible.
Okay.
So there's no room for that.
Okay. No easy answers.
Yeah. No easy answers. This is BCG, brother. Let's go, Nick. I want to hear it, bro.
Hmm. I mean, I was gonna say if you're able to negotiate with the supplier, because that cost of goods sold is a lot. But you
It's
just
coming
said
from China and Bangladesh though.
if you're saying it's already the cheapest that it can be, then
Our manufacturing is the cheapest. It's coming from China and Bangladesh.
and we have no manufacturing in the US, right?
We have no manufacturer in the US. We usually just ship products.
Okay. Um, hmm. I would see and you're saying we have to keep the flagship store because that's part of our branding and marketing, right?
We need it for our marketing. In terms of manufacturing, we're already in the cheapest place. However, right now, most of our clothes are being flown in. So that's how we get them into the United States. We fly them in.
Okay.
Go ahead. Or do you want to add one more point, Nick?
No, go ahead. I'm actually kind of
Oh,
struggling with this. So
no, you're good. Go ahead, Devasis.
So like whatever I'm hearing right now is like we can't change much of like the cost. The main cost being like the cost of goods sold. We can't use like a different manufacturing plant because it would be more expensive on the store or
That is,
remove the flagship store. So I'm thinking like in to offset and balance it out, would we have to raise the prices of our products?
that
Because
is
that would be like what I would think.
That's a good point and actually a fair analysis. However, if we raise our product pricing right now, what that would do is we would lose some market share. And especially in our presence right now where we're unprofitable, I don't think that would be a good decision, or at least a decision that management is willing to take right now. But I kept talking about shipping, right? And I told you guys that shipping right now is through the air, right? So it's through the air. Is that more expensive than taking a boat? Is there any savings that we could have there? That is one potential point, right? So that is something that they had there. Another point, so I'm not just trying to be an asshole here. This is actually what I had from the case. Another point that they said is instead of closing or, moving our flagship store or closing mall stores, what we should be doing, and the creative idea here that BCG was looking for, is sharing the rent with another business. So opening a coffee shop within the store would cut 25% of our debt burden at the flagship store. So if we opened a Starbucks within and then we charge Starbucks some type of rent, boom. Now we have some type of savings that we're making here, 25% within it. And it kind of makes sense. Like you're in a Uniqlo or you're some type of Macy's, there is a Starbucks within there. And if we do this for our flagship store, we only have 4 stores. So this would really create some type of impact right away. A 25% savings on that 18 million is 1/4 of 18 million, which is about 4.5, 4.2, something like that. So it's close to that. That's a big savings. And alongside the cost of goods sold, that's a variable cost. Here we're gonna have another savings of another 4.5, right? So good. However, if you do that math, that's 9 million. We were at 138 million. You subtract that, that's 129. And I know Riley's already done that math. He's like, we're still not profitable. We're still 2 million under profit. So Devas brought up a good point. What are ways that we could increase our revenue to become more profitable?
I was gonna say is if there's a way that we can drive more. Or let me ask this clarifying question: do we have an e-commerce presence with the store or no? Like, do we have like a website?
I told you initially we did, but however, for this case right now, online store, we are not ready to make that investment at this time. So as a management team, we're not ready to make that investment.
So no e-commerce, pretty much.
No e-commerce right now.
Okay.
I had a question. So we're only selling like clothing. Is there a way that we sell something else? Like stationery. I know like a lot of companies, like even with like selling like clothing, they now move into like accessories and like stationery items.
That's a good recommendation. However, not specifically what I'm looking for. But you're pushing closer. So maybe not selling contemporary items, but looking at different items within our products to sell. So that could be some type of recommendation. But what are different ways that you could potentially boost revenue? So if we think of revenue, it's broken down into units sold times price per unit. what are ways that we could either increase our units being sold or increase the price of our units? So usually, go ahead, Ethan.
I know the idea of collaboration was brought up earlier, and I'm thinking about Uniqlo. They did the collaboration with Cause like a few years back. I
Yeah.
feel like it got a lot of people interested in like going to a Uniqlo store to buy it when before they might have not heard of Uniqlo, and they know
Yeah.
because like collaborations, big names like that.
Okay, so maybe that's, I think you're pushing towards it. So maybe adjusting the designs and potential styles that they have right now because they're having clear troubles in terms of selling those so that it fits more of an American culture or more of an American I guess style, reflective of the American culture of style. I guess
I,
that
I feel like the American customers too are willing to pay more for certain brands, like the collaborations. Like I feel like people, they're like, oh, it's a collaboration with this,
yeah,
artist. I want to represent them. They're willing to pay like instead of 15 for a t-shirt, like 30, 45, like
yeah.
stuff like that.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Go ahead, Riley.
I would be curious to know if we're selling the same products on Fifth Avenue as we are in the malls, because I would imagine we could potentially sell higher end products. I know we said we can't change our margins, but we could potentially change our mix in the city
Yeah, so
versus at the malls.
I think that's a good point. So more or less, maybe we sell the same products. However, what I will say is what we could do is maybe change that. So maybe different sizing or different designs, especially in like New York. You're on the flagship store in New York versus a mall that might be in a more suburban setting, right? So maybe you're bringing up a good point where you could potentially change our designs and offer more sizes to increase our revenue. Oh, fuck. Go ahead, Elia.
It might be too late, but I
Yeah.
don't know if we can maybe segment if we are budgeting like marketing into like overhead, if we could maybe segment that better to fit like if we're in the suburbs for our malls, like if we can better like I guess gear our marketing towards I guess that something that would appeal more to that area as
Yeah.
well as doing maybe more of like a different segmentation for the flagship store.
Yeah. No, I think that, and that I think pushes towards the idea of more or less figuring out that Americans don't like the products being sold here. There's different segmentations within the American market too, and we should be pushing for that. So I think that's a good point. This is just what Word and Casebook said, so not to say that any of your guys' ideas are terribly wrong, but this is what they're looking for out of this case, right? So that's just the idea. So we could, the potential answers here that I was expecting from you guys are train the sales staff to sell better. No, we can't do that. Lower the prices. No, it wouldn't solve our margin issue, right? Online stores, we weren't ready at this time to make that investment. However, it does turn out that American customers don't love the styles and have some trouble with Asian sizes. The sizes tend to be too conservative, or the styles tend to be too conservative. The colors are too muted. Our clothing tends to run small for the US market. Adjusting designs and sizes and continuing to manufacture separately for the American market will cost us 12 million annually, but it will provide us $23 million in additional revenue. So that's potentially what they were saying here. And that would cause us an incremental revenue of 11 million. So now we pushed down our costs, but we've also pushed down our revenue. At this point, we are a profitable company. So we're at 129 million in terms of cost plus the 11 million to the 127 million in revenue. Now we're at about 138 million in terms of revenue and 129 million in terms of cost. So now we're a profitable company. So here it just breaks down a little bit of the math here. But now it's over. You've done the case. So you guys initially told me that you guys wanted to, I gave you the case, I gave you the prompt. I told you that this company was facing a profitability issue. And then you guys came in and you guys analyzed the market. You guys told me that you guys want to look into the revenues, the cost. Some of you guys said like markets, building out their brand awareness. but today I had data more on the revenues and costs. And I showed you how that would really initially play out, right? What I want you to do here is to come up with some type of recommendation when the CEO is about to come in. The CEO is a female, she. So when you're referring to the CEO, when you're giving your recommendation, call her as she, right? If you say he, you're going to deduct points here. And this is on Warden's casebook. This is not me just saying this. This is on Warden's casebook, right? This is what BCG was looking for. It said something about biases. I don't know. I could give a fuck. But for this case, what I'm looking for is for you not to say he. Because I told you the CEO is about to walk in and she would like to hear your recommendations. So what would you say?
Can we say you? Like it seems
Yeah,
weird if
you
I'm
could say
addressing
say
her, I
you.
wouldn't call her
You
she,
could
you
say,
know?
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, sure. Sure. Just don't call her he or him.
Can you call her a ma'am, or is
You,
that kind of disrespectful?
I was you guys are pushing it. No, you could maybe call her a ma'am. I'd probably say miss. I mean, ma'am's kind of old, guys. Come on, bro. Be respectful. Wow. I'll just say that if you're ever in a case and they say she, make sure that you keep it on that level. You don't want to deduct anything here. I thought that was kind of different when I was reading through the case book, but something you need to look forward to. So. All right, ma'am, Alaya, what would you say? What would you recommend our CEO as she walks in today?
Okay, I wouldn't address her as ma'am. I'd preferably say miss, and if I knew her last name, I would say that, but I would probably just keep it to miss.
Perfect.
We've been given the a profitability issue where you've recently introduced this Asian company, Unicloth, to American markets, and we are seeing some profitability issues. So our solution is has been mostly pointed towards the fact that the marketing, or not the marketing, but rather the style of clothing, considering that it is casual style that's geared toward Asian markets, could be adjusted to suit American tastes. So the conservative colors could be more, brighter, as well as the sizing being more conservative or smaller in Asian markets could be adjusted. And it would come with some costs, but the profit or the increase in revenue would make up for it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And then any risks that you think are associated with that?
I would say the only risk would be I guess, the initial costs of design, and maybe some product, or I mean research and development, but I guess it wouldn't be too much. But I guess the risks I can think of are just related to colors, different dyes. I'm assuming all this factors in, as well as the sizing and maybe even different textiles potentially.
Yeah. No, I thank you. That was really good. I really appreciate you starting off with the prompt, from there walking through what we did in the case, and then from there at the end, I know I prompted you a little bit, but actually walking through some actual risks within this. So that was really good. That's exactly how you want to end a case. That's exactly how you want to end a case. Maybe be a little bit more confident with it, but that was it. Like that was really good. That was the structure, and that's what we've been teaching. So thank you for that. I'll just lay it out here just for the time's sake here, but currently we're seeing revenues of 128 million, but cost of 138 million, meaning we're $13 million in the red. We're an unprofitable business. However, we studied the cost and revenue structure of your retail operations and found that there are a few actions you could take at this time right now to see some impact in your company. On the cost side, we recommend changing your means of shipping from air to boat. A change we have found would bring actual $4.5 million in actual savings. Additionally, we recommend seeking a partner to share your rent space at the flagship store. We believe, for example, that placing a coffee shop within the store would save you 25% rent for a savings of $1.75 million annually, and perhaps encourage your customers to shop more. Finally, we recommend revamping your inventory for the American market by adjusting designs and the sizes to meet more demand. We estimate this will drive $11 million in additional revenue. Together, these measures will more than make you profitable, breaking even, and making $4.25 million in profit. Potential risk of this plan, including having an unreliable retail partner at the flagship store, making products the American market still doesn't like, and delaying inventory stocking through the new shipping methods. For this, we recommend a study into whom the retail partner should be, engaging in extensive market research to produce the correct SKUs for the market, and adjusting U.S. warehouse operations and lead times to ensure that stocking is not delayed. That's a more comprehensive one. That's Warden MBA is doing this shit. I thought what Elia did was great. It's pretty similar to how I would do it. More or less, the idea is walk through the case, walk through what we did in the case, and then from there, give some type of recommendation. At the end, lay out your risk. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. We got a social. I hope to see you guys. We got some bowling alleys on Thursday this week. That's gonna be March 13th, 5 to 6 p.m. We have 5 lanes, 25 to 30 students. Please be there if you can be. We spent money for this, so we hope that you guys, can utilize it. It's free bowling, and we'll probably bring some cookies too. So hopefully that's another incentive to get you guys there. But if not, next week, what we have going on next Tuesday. So make sure you guys are here. Make sure you guys are early. I don't need no 6:02 stragglers coming in. You guys know who you are. But just get here like 5 minutes early, please. I'm gonna send you a new Zoom link. So if you weren't here for the first 5-10 minutes, I'm gonna send you a new Zoom link next week because it's not gonna be the same Zoom link that we've been doing off our regular meetings. So you'll get an email then. Just try to join 5 to 10 minutes early. Come ready with questions. You're gonna get an opportunity to speak to 4 people at Plant Moran, 1 consultant from Risk Consulting, 1 consultant from Tech Consulting, 1 consultant from Cybersecurity, and then a recruiter from Plant Moran. So take advantage of this opportunity, bring questions, and come prepared. Additionally, next Thursday, so we have our social this Thursday. Next Thursday, we're bringing in huge firms and 3 consultants from 3 different huge firms. So West Monroe, FTI Consulting, and then Huron Consulting. So these are considered almost tier 2 firms. And these are really, really good opportunities. Honestly, I'm super happy that we're even able to get these people in, but they're nice enough to even spend the time. They work in tech consulting. The other one works in digital consulting. And then we have one that should be coming. He's not confirmed yet, but he's at West Monroe practicing life sciences. But that's what we have coming for the next 2 weeks. Like I promised you guys, I'm going to try to give you as many opportunities to network, get exposed to different firms, and inevitably figure out what you guys want to do. So hopefully you guys can see that very clearly. And hopefully we see you guys at the bowling alley on Thursday, 5 o'clock. So we appreciate you guys being here. If you're not part of the GroupMe, please scan this so that you guys stay updated. I'll send more updates, especially for this bowling alley event. But that's it on my side, guys. Thank you so much.